All right, so get this. Today we are going deep, deep into a period, a time that like totally flipped the script on everything. I'm talking about the age of revolutions.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and we've got a ton, and I mean a ton of research and articles here, all about those revolutions that changed like everything, power, society, even how we think.
It's true.
And get this, you ready for this? The actual word, revolution, it went through a whole makeover during this time. Like, who knew words could, like, rebel too?
Well, it's funny because before all this, before this era, revolution usually meant like the way planets move.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it meant something that like goes in a circle, unchanging. It always ends up right back where it started.
So, like, the total opposite of how we think of it now.
Exactly.
So instead of, like, getting rid of the old ways, it meant keeping everything the same.
Pretty much.
Wow. Okay, that's fascinating.
But then during, the age of revolutions, all of a sudden, bam.
Things changed.
Think American Revolution, French Revolution, Haitian Revolution. The word got this whole new meaning of like radical change.
Yeah, like a total break from the past.
Right. It went from like describing what's going on in space to describing how humans were like shaking things up down here.
Okay, I'm so hooked already. So, like, when was this age of revolutions? In school, they always make it seem like a nice little box on a timeline, but something tells me it's a bit more complicated.
Oh, you are right to question those timelines.
Yeah.
Most historians, they say the Age of Revolutions was from 1775 to 1848, but even those dates, people argue about them.
Really?
Yeah, some say it started earlier, pointing to stuff like England's Glorious Revolution
Okay.
back in the 1600s.
Oh, wow.
And some even say it's still going on, even today.
Whoa, so the effects are still rippling out. That's mind-blowing.
Mm-hmm.
But, okay, for now, let's stick to those main years, those core years, right? We've got all these revolutions happening, America, France, Haiti, the Industrial Revolutions, like so much going on. Is there a way to kind of group them to make sense of the different, like, styles of revolution?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we can kind of break them down into a few main types.
Mm-hmm.
But they, like, overlap a lot. You've got your classic political revolutions, the American, the French, aiming to overthrow the people in charge, usually monarchies, to get more representative governments.
Okay.
Then you have social revolutions, like what happened in Haiti,
Right.
where it's about, like, reshaping the whole structure of society,
Yeah.
fighting for, equality, justice, that sort of thing.
So it's not just about switching who's in charge, but changing, like, who has the power and how they use it.
Yeah, precisely.
Okay.
And then there's, like, the economic revolution.
The Industrial Revolution.
Right. This one's a bit different. It changed, like,
Oh.
how we work, how we make stuff, how we live our lives.
I see.
Like, think of it as a revolution in the, like, nuts and bolts of how society works.
Gotcha. Okay. Yes, starting to see the bigger picture here.
Mm-hmm.
But what I still don't quite get is why.
Mm-hmm.
Why were there so many revolutions, like, all packed into this one period? It's like all of a sudden the world decided to go revolution crazy.
It is pretty crazy when you think about it, isn't it? Just imagine living in a world ruled by kings and queens where, regular people, they had no say in their lives. Zero.
Yeah.
That feeling of being powerless, the lack of fairness, that's a huge part of what gets a revolution going.
Yeah, totally. I can see how that would make people seriously frustrated.
Totally, absolutely. But there's another ingredient, another key piece here. Ideas.
Okay.
During this time, ideas about, individual rights, equality, people having a say in their government, all this was spreading like crazy thanks to those Enlightenment thinkers. It wasn't just like grumbling anymore. People started believing they deserved better.
So it's like these Enlightenment ideas, they gave people a way to explain why they were unhappy and a picture of what a better future could look like.
Exactly.
But there had to be more to it than just like bad rulers and new ideas, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Usually it was a whole bunch of things all coming together at once that really pushed things over the edge.
Okay, I see.
You throw in some, economic hardship, like widespread poverty because of bad harvests or wars that cost a ton of money.
Right.
And you've got a population that is, like, ready to explode.
Ready to make a change.
Oh, and don't forget the restrictions on freedom, too.
Yes.
Limits on what you could say, your religion, if you could gather with other people.
Yeah.
All those things just, like, add fuel to the fire.
Just like this perfect storm, isn't it?
It is.
Discontent, new ideas, no money, and new freedom. Yeah, that's definitely a recipe for radical change.
Definitely. And for, like, a prime example of all of this coming together, look at the French Revolution.
Yeah.
France, in the late 1700s, it was like a pressure cooker about to blow. Decades of the economy being a mess, social inequality, and a monarchy that was like totally out of touch with what people needed.
Yeah.
No wonder it all just like exploded.
But even with all this talk of unity and revolution and everything, I'm guessing not everybody agreed on how big those changes should be,
Yeah.
right? Like some people probably wanted to just tear it all down, and others probably thought, hey, let's maybe take it slow.
Oh, yeah, that is a really important point. Even inside, revolutionary movements, there were often arguments about how far they should go. Some folks, the total revolution type, they wanted to like overhaul everything.
All right.
The government, social norms, even cultural values.
Okay.
But then you had the limited revolution camp who were more about specific changes, like tweaking the system, expanding rights without, burning everything to the ground.
So even in the middle of a revolution, you've got these like internal arguments about the best way forward.
That's so interesting. Makes you wonder about the consequences of all this. All this upheaval, all this change, what kind of lasting impact did these revolutions actually have on the world?
Well, to really get a sense of the consequences, I think we need to like zoom in on a specific story.
Right.
Imagine a young guy, we'll call him Thomas, living in like rural England in the early 1800s. His life and the lives of so many others was about to be totally turned upside down by the Industrial Revolution.
Oh, I love where this is going.
Yeah.
Let's hear about Thomas and how his life kind of shows what was happening in the bigger picture. But first, I'm just curious, what has stood out to you so far? Anything like surprising or super interesting?
So Thomas, he grew up on a farm, right?
Yeah.
His whole life was tied to the land, the seasons, the way things had always been done for like centuries.
Yeah.
But then along comes this rumble of change, like literally a rumble.
Oh.
They're building a factory nearby.
And it promises, work, wages, a chance to get away from that backbreaking farm life.
Right.
And Thomas's father, he was in debt, so he saw this as a way out.
Oh, yeah.
So young Thomas, he leaves behind everything he's ever known and walks through those factory gates.
I bet that was like a whole different world.
Sure.
Just the noise, the pace, how big it all was.
Right.
Going from like open fields to this cramped, loud factory floor.
Totally. It must have felt like stepping into a different universe.
Totally.
And it was a universe ruled by the machine,
No.
It wasn't the sun telling him when to work and rest anymore. It was the clock, the shift, just this constant need to produce more.
Yeah.
Thomas learned new skills, operated machines he never could have imagined, became like part of this huge system of production.
It's like he wasn't just a farmer anymore.
No.
He was a cog in this like machine of industrial progress.
Mm.
It really shows how the Industrial Revolution, it wasn't just about like inventions. It changed lives, uprooted whole communities, and created this whole new social order.
It did. And that shift, from farm to factory, it had effects way beyond just Thomas's own life.
Right.
It's why people started moving to cities in huge numbers looking for work.
Right.
And that created new class structures, new tensions between different groups, new ideas about wealth and labor. The Industrial Revolution, it wasn't just economic, it was like a social and cultural earthquake.
So while Thomas's story is like a window into the human side of the Industrial Revolution, it also shows how it was connected to all the political and social stuff happening at the same time. It's like all tangled up together, each revolution feeding into the others.
Exactly. And that brings us to the legacy of this whole era.
Yeah.
The effects of the Age of Revolutions, they're still all around us.
Really? How's...
Well, think about those core ideas that started all those revolutions, like individual rights, representative government, social justice. They're still driving change all over the world.
Wow, that's true.
Mhm.
So it's not just like ancient history. It's still alive, like it's still affecting us. But I gotta say, didn't some of these revolutions have bad consequences too? I mean, yeah, the American Revolution led to democracy, but it happened on land taken from Native Americans.
Yeah.
And the French Revolution, as great as the ideas were, it got super chaotic and violent.
Oh, you're bringing up a crucial point. Revolutions, they're messy, complicated.
Yeah.
They can be liberating, sure, but they can also be destructive. They can move us forward and sometimes, pull us back. It's important to see the whole picture, the good and the bad. And that's why, understanding history is so important.
Yeah.
It's not about glorifying the past. It's about learning from it, understanding how complex it was, and using that to figure out how to deal with the present.
Okay, so we have to look at these revolutions critically. See both the wins and the losses.
Yeah.
But let's switch gears a bit and talk about what's going on now. Like, what revolutions are happening right now in our time?
Well, just look around. I mean, we're seeing this huge resurgence of movements for social justice, challenging like the deep-rooted inequalities, demanding equal rights and opportunities for everybody.
Right.
We've got climate activists pushing for big, bold action to tackle the climate crisis. Like they're urging us to completely rethink how we treat the planet. And we can't forget the technological revolution that's happening. I mean,
Right.
it's changing industries, economies. It's making us ask some really big questions about like the future of work, how we connect with each other in this digital age. It's a lot.
It's almost too much, to be honest, the speed of it all, how big it is. But it also makes me wonder, are these movements really revolutions? I mean, they're not like storming palaces and overthrowing government.
That is a great question. And it gets to like how we even define revolution now. It's not just those classic images of armed uprisings anymore.
Right.
We use it to describe all sorts of big changes, technological revolutions, digital revolutions, even like personal revolutions,
Yeah,
when
yeah.
people change themselves, how they think, how they grow.
So maybe revolution isn't just about getting rid of the people in charge, but about like challenging the way things are,
Yeah.
pushing limits, trying to make things better, whether it's in our own lives or for the whole world.
Exactly. It's about that basic human urge to question things, to shake things up, to imagine something better. And that's why the Age of Revolutions, even though it happened a while ago, it feels so relevant today.
Yeah, I see that.
It speaks to this like desire that humans have always had for progress, for justice, for a world that actually lives up to its ideals.
It's inspiring, but also kind of scary, realizing we're part of this story of change that never ends, this constant fight to make things better. But with so much happening, it's like, where do we even start? How can one person make a difference in all this mess?
That's the challenge, isn't it? But it's also like what makes it so amazing. We live in a world that's constantly changing, where everything's connected. There are so many ways to get involved, to help, to be a part of the change we want to see. But it has to start with awareness, with learning about the issues, understanding different points of view,
Hmm.
and, really looking at our own biases, our own assumptions.
So it's not just about picking a side and shouting the
Oh,
loudest.
no.
It's about doing something that's informed, thoughtful, really committing to making a positive impact, even if it seems small.
Exactly. And it's about realizing that this age of revolutions, it never really stopped. It's still going on. It's this ongoing change of ideas, values, systems. It's a story we're all writing together, one chapter at a time. So I'm curious what really stood out to you in all of this? What's making you think differently about the past, the present, the future?
You know what's really sticking with me is this idea that revolutions aren't just these big historical events. They're like processes that are still going on right now. It makes history feel less like something you read in a book and more like a conversation that we're all part of.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. It reminds me of what we talked about earlier, about how even within a revolution, there's this constant back and forth between people who want radical change and those who are more like, let's take it slow. It's like that tension is just baked into what a revolution is.
Right, yeah, like that whole debate between total revolution and limited revolution. It makes me think about all those movements we see today, the climate activists, the social justice movements, the way technology is changing everything. There's the same kind of range of approaches, some saying we need to change the whole system, others saying, hey, let's make small changes step by step.
It's like history repeating itself, isn't it? The same arguments and dilemmas keep popping up, just in different times and places. And it brings up a really important question. How do we make sense of all this? How do we decide what's the best way to make a difference, knowing that revolutions are never simple?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's easy to feel kind of overwhelmed by all the problems we see in the world. Like, does what one person does even matter?
That's a question that people who wanted change have been asking themselves forever. But I think the answer comes down to remembering that revolutions, at their heart, are about people. They start because of what humans need and want. And sure, the history books talk about leaders and big movements, but real change happens when everyday people decide to stand up and say, enough is enough. We need something better.
So it's not about waiting for some perfect leader or a perfect plan to come along.
Right.
It's about each of us figuring out how we can contribute, how we can push for progress, whatever that means to us.
Exactly. And that's where the lessons from the Age of Revolutions are so important. The people who fought for change back then, they weren't superheroes. They were regular folks who faced huge challenges, had to make hard choices. And yeah, they messed up sometimes too. But their stories show us that change is possible, that even small acts of courage, of standing up for what you believe in, and can have a huge ripple effect.
It's like that saying, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has.
Right. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from the Age of Revolutions. It's that reminder that we're not just watching history happen, we're part of it. And what we do, what we choose, it matters.
That's pretty powerful stuff. It makes me think about Thomas again, that young guy we were talking about. He didn't set out to start a revolution. He was just trying to survive, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
But by going with the flow, by taking those new opportunities, he ended up being part of something bigger, part of this story of change and progress.
And that's what makes history so interesting and so relevant to our lives today. It's not just dates and wars, it's about how we're all connected, how the choices we make, big and small, all add up to this giant story of what it means to be human.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Age of Revolutions, any final thoughts, any big takeaways you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I just encourage everyone to keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep that spirit of revolution alive in your own life. Whether it's fighting against something you think is wrong, supporting a cause you care about, or even just pushing yourself to grow and learn new things, remember, you have the power to make a difference.
That's a great way to put it. And on that note, well, we've reached the end of our journey through the Age of Revolutions. We hope you enjoyed listening.
Thanks for being here. Until next time, keep those revolutionary sparks flying.